with Fornet, and today we'll be discussing about the new year and new security concerns for 2017. So every year, Fornet, who is a global cybersecurity solutions provider, comes out with these new security threats, new predictions. So about every November, December, we come out with these new predictions. We do this. We did in 2016. It was big on ransomware that we predicted about, and the Internet of Things, and a few other entities as well. This year kind of trickles off that as well. And the big reason behind this is because the threat landscape has dynamically changed over the past few years. Every 6 to 7 years, we have a new product that comes out, a new device that we need to protect against. Back in 2007, the iPhone was launched, Android devices were launched, and then a few years later, we had tablets, and now a few years after that, we have all these new Internet of Things. With this, it becomes a complex challenge to actually manage and secure all of these devices. So there are a few predictions out there from different third-party companies on where we'll be by 2020. So Gartner predicts by 2020 there will be 20 billion Internet of Things devices out there. There are other third parties that say upwards of tenfold of that, upwards of 200 billion devices compared to about 1 billion PCs. It's an astronomical difference in what we need to protect and how we're going to protect it. So throughout this talk, we'll help to maybe enlighten or share new security strategies and see how Fornet and FortiGuard's kind of changing the game when it comes to the security space. So real quick, just to kind of backtrack of who is Fornet. They're a global cybersecurity company. We were founded by 2 engineers, Ken and Michael Z, about 17 years ago. In 2000, we grew exponentially from that. And one of the big pillars to Fornet's success is our FortiGuard labs. And there's 3 main pillars, and most of this will be on FortiGuard. So FortiGuard is not just one thing. It's a combination of over 300 leading-edge researchers and real-time input from the over 2.8 million devices that we have out in the wild right now, reporting and continuously updating all of our customers, providing automatic alerts and updates through threat intelligence. So we have our white hat hackers as well as our security researchers that are all providing and seeing these unknown malwares and making these updates to all of our customers. So now that we've talked about the who, kind of what's FortiGuard's record? And I won't read off all these statistics, but you can see 95,000 malware programs were neutralized per minute last year. And you extrapolate that per week, and then you really see 2 big numbers to focus on are the top right, where you have over 200 terabytes of threat samples. And then the bottom right is probably the most important. And that's our zero-day vulnerability threats discovered. So we've discovered over 300 zero-day threats between our FortiGuard labs. And that's important because everyone has their AV signatures, their IPS signatures, and but what we're most worried about is the unknown malware, the true zero days that are out there, the ransomware, the crypto lockers, the lockies, and all the different variants of those. And by and far, we lead as #1 in zero-day vulnerabilities discovered. A few examples real quick that kind of go back to the Internet of Things. About a year ago, we found a zero-day vulnerability in Fitbit, responsibly disclosed it. They wrote a patch for it. And then just in November of this past year, we found vulnerabilities in Adobe, responsibly disclosed those, and they wrote patches about 3 weeks. So we're constantly working with companies to help them out in responsibly disclosing any of those vulnerabilities and trying to keep basically the world safe from cyber threats. And all of this research and all this actionable intelligence is fed into all of our security services, whether that be our application control, our AV, our IPS, our IP reputation service, and a slew of other services as well. So now we'll get to it. We'll talk about the 2017 threat predictions here. So before that, real quick, why are we concerned about these predictions? Well, kind of going back to the first threat that was in 1986, two brothers created the first malware called the Brain, and it was on a floppy disk drive, and all it did was as soon as you put it in, it would upload their contact information. So we've come a long way 31 years later to now we're not just having one-off hackers or script kiddies or people that are just messing around. This has become much more organized. We have state-sponsored cybercrime, organized crime such as mafia understands that it's much more profitable and less risky to go ahead and exfiltrate data, sell it to the highest bidder, rather than doing some white-collar crimes such as robbing a bank or something like that. These organizations are very, very structured too. They have a core level of sales reps that are all spamming, and then they have managers above them, and then a C-level executives as well that are kind of pulling the strings. So we've come a long way in what exactly malware is and how it's utilized and implemented. We kind of see, here's a nice timeline here of some of the biggest malwares. You look back at the I Love You virus, which basically took advantage of vulnerability in your email and took the first 50 contacts and then basically mailed all those 50 contacts, and the purpose was to actually steal passwords. That affected about 500,000 PCs back in 2000 and cost upwards of $15 billion in damage, and that's just in 2000. So, come a long way. And we have 6 predictions today for 2017. The first is going to talk about, kind of starts with the Internet of Things. So typically, our first prediction is smart to smarter. And it's titled because most malware, in essence, is dumb. In some way, it's said to do this or do that. And yes, it's got some advanced techniques and deception behind it, but generally, malware is dumb. We're looking at kind of the precursor of malware, AI for malware now. Basically, it's going to look ahead and be smarter and increasingly able to operate autonomously. It'll basically be situation aware, meaning that it'll understand the environment it's in, make calculated decisions about what to do next. In many ways, it'll behave kind of like a human attacker. It'll perform reconnaissance, identify targets, choose the method of attack, and then intelligently evade detection. On top of that, too, as I said, it uses kind of a precursor to AI. Instead of the do this or do that, it's going to take kind of a branch technology approach, and it's going to become more adaptive. On top of that as well, with the Internet of Things, we look at cross-platform attacks, or what we call transformer malware. All of these devices, the Internet of Things devices, have a lot of different operating systems. So it's very difficult to protect against those, write signatures for them, and at the end of the day, decide where it's coming from, who, and what security level. So the cross-platform malware is going to then take advantage of some of these devices and basically break code, infiltrate, and exploit how it wants to. Another key behind the transformer malware is just how we talked about the branch predictions. but just how it's going to work with the Internet of Things, whether it's going to look at the different traffic flows of these devices, the number of devices, the applications that are being used. Our second prediction, and really the impact from prediction number one, is all these devices being hacked, and they're meant for our lives to be more automated and more efficient, and not having access to that takes us backwards, basically. So prediction number two is going back to IoT again, keeping the manufacturers liable. So most manufacturers, they create these devices to, as I said, make our lives simpler. They're designed with consumerization in mind, with profitability in mind. They're not meant or built with security in mind. So we have a number of devices out there. You have your smartwatches, your heart monitors, your pacemakers, lights, your smart cars, and so forth. The big one is cameras, and the reason that this is that we're predicting manufacturers will be held liable is because of the growth of shadow nets. Shadow nets are basically a term we use for measuring IoT botnets that we can't really see or measure using conventional tools. Right now, these shadow nets, kind of an example of a shadow net is like the Mirai attack. So if anyone's familiar with Mirai, it's been a big botnet that's happened in the past 6 months or so, and we'll talk about it a little bit more going forward here. But it took down a good amount of the Northeast back October 21st. And what it did was it took advantage of vulnerabilities in mostly security cameras and some other home devices, DVRs, that created basically a DDoS attack on a lot of networks. And that, at the forefront, security hasn't been involved with these devices, so at the end of the day, there will be regulations that are going to be put towards these manufacturers to make sure that they're kept up to date, that it's a software and operating system that we understand. And that kind of dovetails also into the deep web of IoT. So there's actually basically search indexes, just like Google, where you can go ahead and you can find information about these devices. Information that normal consumers shouldn't have access to, probably. And this is all public information. If you go to Shodan right here, you can actually create a new account, and you can get the IP addressing schemes, the server hosts that host some of the applications for these devices, some of the DNS information for these devices. A lot of information that, I mean, you could find it and plug away at really finding some vulnerabilities in these devices. And you don't have to go into the dark web or anything. It's literally just a public website that has all the information. A lot of this was the reason of how the Mirai attack actually happened. And a number of other issues as well lie in there. IoT supply chain poisoning, which is kind of a term that we put in forth because with IoT, typically manufacturers are designing all these different products and everything to push out to consumers as fast as possible. And typically, they don't have the marketing or the technological ability to design some of the parts for this. So macroeconomics dictates that there's going to be one OEM manufacturer that has all these different, basically, components and that they create for IoT, and then manufacturers that want to design something for the consumer are going to go to that manufacturer that makes the component. They're going to put their little spin on it and then sell it out. So at that point now, we have one access point to really understand from one component how multiple IoT devices actually work. IoT in the cloud. Going back to these millions of devices that are out there right now, it's not necessarily that cloud architecture is insecure. It's the fact that the millions of devices are insecure. So we're likely to see some type of cloud poisoning from these devices. Typically, cloud security and any security relies on who you let in and what access they actually have. This model is going to be pushed to the levels this year, and it can result in millions, if not, once we get to that billion point for the IoT, and for even besides IoT, just your iPhones, your Android devices, your tablets, and everything else. Actually, cloud poisoning. The impact of this is dramatic because everyone's got some type of cloud migration or is adopting or adapting to the cloud in their own personal way, whether they're fully encompassing the public cloud or they have their own private cloud or they have something in the middle, some type of hybrid model. Well, as the reputation starts to decrease on the security of these devices, people and companies will likely stray away from the cloud a little bit. So that affects our economy. It affects a number of dynamics, but imagine the amount of these devices that are poisoning or infecting the AWS or any of your cloud architectures. And are we going to continually push the button with cloud, or are we going to go backwards, or are we going to enforce some types of regulations as well for it? Our fourth one is our attacks on infrastructure. So there are a number of different cities out there that are trying to become the first smart cities, or they're already implemented in that right now. And they're trying to leverage some type of automation for heating, air conditioning, ventilation, traffic control, traffic lights, water, electric, and so forth, whether it be smart cars or anything that they can make more efficient, really. And just kind of going back for a second, we talked about the devices and everything out there, and we'll go back to kind of the infrastructure, but this is now not, it's not a pipe dream anymore. We see this, a lot of these attacks actually happening right now. These aren't predictions anymore. So kind of going back to 2007 real quick, we'll talk about the pacemakers, basically, that can be controlled, and a few other devices. But going back to 2007, just to give an example, Dick Cheney, the ex-vice president, was concerned about his pacemaker being hacked into, and him and his doctor were concerned about an assassination plot. So what they did was they decided to disable the actual Bluetooth module in it. A few years later, this actually became an episode in Homeland, if anyone ever watches that. But just last year, this actually became reality. And I encourage anyone to look this up, but the University of South Alabama has a fantastic medical and computer science section or division. And what they do is they have a $100,000 simulated human. And what they do with it is they run it through multiple medical simulations, but they also have implemented pacemakers and insulin pumps to test computer science actions on it. So it wasn't very hard to replicate, but they took this $100,000 simulated human and they put a pacemaker in there and took a simple DDoS attack and a simple other scripting attack that you can find online, and were able to replicate a heart attack. Another one was done with insulin pumps. So now this is no longer just something you see in the movie or just paranoia. This is actually coming to fruition, and it's been proven to actually be capable. Another one we talk about is the the Philips light bulb has been shown to be easily hacked. The Fitbit that we already talked about. One of the biggest concerns are cameras, of course. Almost every business has some type of security camera, or even home, or whether it's a baby monitor. There was a big news article on the baby monitors being hacked. So unfortunately, this is why we need to push the envelope for some of these manufacturers to really design these devices with security in mind. Coming back now to kind of the attacks on infrastructure, there's a video that I'm going to show, and it's going to be about these two researchers. They're called Miller and Balasek. And basically what they showed was a Jeep Cherokee here. And I'm going to kind of walk everyone through this. Won't show or have the audio going, but these two security researchers, Miller and Balasek, there's a gentleman in the front here that is a Wired magazine writer. There's Charlie Miller and Chris Balasek here, two security researchers, who are showing the ability today of how you can actually hack into a Jeep Cherokee remotely too, and completely control everything about that Jeep Cherokee. It's part of of Jeep, Chrysler, Dodge, their kind of smart Uconnect system that they have in the car. Now, the researcher is in a regular environment right now. They took him, as you can see, into a parking lot. Right now, he's actually on a highway going about 55 miles an hour. Now, this isn't the first time that they've actually done this. You can see this was done a few years before, where they were actually sitting behind and wired in, and they controlled the car completely. This takes it to a step further, where they were able to remotely hack through the wireless network, or through the 4G network, to be able to control this smart system. So it starts out relatively not too invasive. He's just going along, and they start to turn the volume up, and he can't hear. And now they go ahead and take advantage of the Smart Connect system here, putting the pictures of the two guys in jumpsuits. From there, they turn on the heat and the AC and completely control. And he has no control over the heat or the volume here. So at this point now, he can't hear, but they take it up another level, and they control the windshield wipers. And so now he can't see and he can't hear on a highway. They've completely controlled it. Not only that, but they can go ahead and take advantage of the car lock system. Right here, they just shut off the engine completely. He has no steering control. He has no ability to brake or to go faster. He literally has to take that car, stop it, put it into park, turn the car off, and then turn it back on. And he starts to freak out here a little bit, so they help him out and stop hacking it. But that's just a general sense of what really, just a simulation of what can happen, real life test here. Again, they take him into a parking lot and drive him around as well, and he starts kind of freaking out. But a good video and kind of a testament to what can be done now. On top of that, we have, as I said, some of these predictions were done back in November, December timeframe for 2017. Well, some of them have actually happened in the past few weeks, so we're kind of right on track. There's a 4-star hotel in the Austrian Alps that was hacked just a few weeks ago, and it was hit with ransomware. And basically, the hackers hit it with ransomware, and they locked the doors for the entire hotel. The hotel was packed, didn't have a spare room at all. So guests were locked in, they were locked out, and at this point, you're on a timeline and you have your reputation to worry about. So they went through a 3-stage process of what are our options here. We can call the police. That's going to take too long. we can go ahead and call our insurance company. That's still going to take too long, and does it cover it even? So they went with a third option, and they just paid the ransom right out of pocket, basically. And they fortunately unlocked the doors and let everyone out or let everyone in. But that's very small in comparison to controlling ventilation or water or fire alarms or HVAC systems, or imagining if the worst were to happen with those locked doors as well. All this is actually now possible. We've got the Ukraine power grid, which is another example of infrastructure being attacked. Over 700,000 people were blacked out. This, again, news firms say that this was state-sponsored by Russia. Who knows if it was or not. You have the Target attack from a few years ago. This was done by an HVAC sensor that wasn't secure, and that was a vulnerability in the system. The hacker was able to go in, and Target got a bunch of alerts, but they didn't know which one to handle and what level to handle. So several months later, we've all got our new Target credit card and a year of credit watching or something, whatever they want to call it. Just actually personally for me, I'm down in the Annapolis area, and all the car garages, payment systems were all hacked. They had a vulnerability. So it wasn't too bad when you just have your credit card breached or something like that, because you get typically a call of, hey, your credit card's been breached, and here we're sending out a new credit card. Business Insider did a study as well, along with a few others, looking at another industry, the car manufacturers. And as we understand, malware is not prejudiced to different verticals. So they did a study, and were able to see that 1 hour of lost time at a car manufacturer can cost up to $1 million. $1 million for 1 hour of downtime. And probably one of the worst ones here would be the nuclear power plants. A lot of these nuclear power plants are on old systems. Old SCADA systems from the 1980s, 1990s that just you don't want to touch because they work, but they found vulnerabilities and malware in them. Examples that we know about: South Korea, Germany, and Japan. We talked about the Mirai botnet and a few instances that hit. So in Germany alone, it disrupted internet service for 900,000 customers. One that we already kind of talked about a little bit that's close to home is the one that affected us in the Northeast. So how this happened was about 100,000 different endpoints. Primarily, like I said before, security cameras were taken control of, and they were used in a distributed denial of service attack on the DNS provider DIN. Sites like Twitter weren't available, Facebook, and a number of other sites, Pinterest. All those big social media ones were not available. Even Krebs on Security was attacked, and his site was taken down. Krebs, if you're not familiar with Krebs on Security, it's a huge, very popular security news site, and Brian Krebs has his own security in place for his site, but he was still able to be taken down by this Mirai botnet. Our fifth one here is ransomware as a service. So 2016, and we had ransomware back in 2015 and 2014 when CryptoLocker first came into fruition. But ransomware was really just a gateway malware at that point. We're looking at now ransomware actually being a service. So we all use some type of software as a service, infrastructure as a service, but now with literally no technological background, experience, or know-how, a script kiddie or someone with no knowledge at all can actually use a ransomware on anyone. basically, these ransomware creators are making these available to these non-technical professionals, and in exchange, they get some of the profits. So now it's just not one hacker or a company of hackers, but they're now selling the service of a ransomware. This has become kind of big as a hacking service for K through 12, where kids will now buy a distributed denial of service attack online, and if they don't want to take their test, instead of 10, 20, 30 years ago, you just pull the fire alarm. Now they're taking down the whole school so that they don't have to take an exam. So some of the top industries for ransomware are, not surprising, education, healthcare, financial, government. We talked about the Austrian hotel, over 15 hospitals that we know about in the past year or two, including one that's pretty close to home for me, MedStar Health, a number of banks and other financial institutions. And then, of course, SLED. You've got the city of Detroit was hit with ransomware. New Jersey, Montana, South Carolina school districts were all hit with ransom, and there are a number of others. We could fill up this whole PowerPoint with examples. So why is healthcare one of the biggest driving factors for ransomware? Well, I kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier. I got hit with my credit card company called me and said, hey, your credit card's been breached, we're sending you out a new one. We'll go ahead and get it taken care of, and I assume on the back end everything's fine. However, that's all a self-done process. I don't have to really do much with it. It doesn't cost me much except for some bothersome and some worry, of course, for you know, of what else is taken into effect. But it's something that I can change. I can call in, replace my credit card, or they call in and automatically do it. But for a hacker, what's not easily changed is patient records and human data. And it's very difficult to change your eye color, your height, your gender, your race, and any other kind of physical or medical attributes. Let's say that you have a certain prescription that you need to get, and they have your health record as well as they know the pharmacy you go to, and a new script is filled out with medication that actually doesn't help you and what you're typically prescribed, but one that actually harms you. And another number of other factors. You have your Social Security number that's tied to it. You have your family history that's tied to it. So going back to the pacemaker example, understanding who has maybe a pacemaker in the family and understanding how that pacemaker is vulnerable, what manufacturer pacemaker you have, and the list goes on, really. So last but not least here is cyber skills shortage, and that's really the result of all these different other predictions. The cyber skills shortage isn't really new, but it's, in terms it's expanded because now we have so many different tools that your network engineer, your network admin, your director of IT, your SOC analyst, your database admin, all these, your wireless network engineer, all of these folks have different jobs and different tools that they use. And on average, there's about 32 different security tools or vendors, manufacturers that are used in a business. So it creates a huge learning curve for any of these job roles. You've got a lot of training that you have to go through. There's lack of experience. And of course, it easily creates a ton of complexity because you have all these point solutions. You have longer learning curves from everyone, increased cost, and of course, it dramatically reduces the efficiency of the business. How many times do you go in and I opened up a support case, and after we got done, that doesn't have to do with us, it has to do with this other vendor or this and that doesn't tie together perfectly or seamlessly. It's a bolted on solution. And you're going back and forth and spending a lot of time trying to make it work. So not only do we have our FortiGuard labs, but we work with a number of other agencies. And this is where Fortinet really shines and how they solve these threat predictions. So we introduced our Fornet Security Fabric. So we've talked a little bit about, we're a global cybersecurity solutions provider, network security solutions provider, and most know us as for our firewall, our next-gen firewall, our FortiGate. But we're not just a firewall company. We're a lot bigger than that. We cover everything from the endpoint to the cloud. And that goes from our enterprise-ready next-gen endpoint, which has what you would expect in an endpoint: web filtering, AV, application firewalling, VPN, two-factor authentication, and a slew of other features. We take the access layer a little bit differently as well. So instead of having your multiple APs and switches and controllers, and there being a lot of complexity and a lot of management and a lot of cost behind this, we take a little bit different approach. So every single FortiGate has a Wi-Fi and switch controller embedded in it. Comes with it, it's included. That allows us to actually push security policies and security profiles and services from the FortiGate right out to the access point via Cat Web Tunnel. We also have, in our APs, some of our APs actually have security embedded into it, such as IPS, AV, web filtering, and application control. And of course, we have our bread and butter, our next-gen firewall, our FortiGate. And we don't just work in one segment or one market or one vertical. We scale from anything, a small business, whether that's a coffee shop or a gas station or a small doctor's office, all the way up to your telecoms, your carrier class firewalls in Verizon, AT&T, at Apple, Microsoft, and every enterprise and business in between. The nice part about that is the second kind of pillar to Fortinet, and that's our FortiOS. Let's say you have several small branch offices, and then you have one headquarters. And those small branch offices have smaller firewalls, and then you have a large FortiGate at your headquarters. Whether you're network admin or engineer or whoever goes into the small one or into the headquarters one, he's going to see the same, he or she is going to see the same OS. And what's nice about that too is it's not just the same OS from that small firewall to the larger one, but it also is homegrown. So we take a different approach to security with a next-gen firewall as well in our operating systems. It's all built in-house. It's an organic approach to security. So we're not using AV from this vendor to implement into our solution. We're not using IPS from someone else, web filtering from someone else, application control from someone else, DLP, and so forth. Everything is built by Fortinet. And to that point, it kind of takes us to our final pillar for Fortinet. What really keeps us up is, and this drives to the performance factor, and that's our FortiASICs. So FortiASICs are application-specific integrated circuits. So anytime generally within a firewall, most traffic is processed by a general CPU. As soon as you start turning on security services, whether that be AV, web filtering, and so forth, VPN, it drops the performance. And that's going to happen with any manufacturer. However, if you can take certain functionalities like SSL inspection, AV, web filtering, and offload those from a general CPU onto a custom-built FortiASIC, you're able to achieve 5 to 10 times performance. We offload those security services from the CPU to a security processor. We're able to offload networking functionalities like IPv6, IPv6, VPN functionality to our network processor. So at that point, you're able to achieve that 5 to 10 times performance. And again, these aren't OEM ASICs that we're trying to bolt onto our solution. These are ASICs that we're building in-house. They're a huge investment on our part, but in order for, we want the best value and the best performance and the best security for our customers, we control the software level and the hardware level and bake it all together. So it's almost like the Apple of network security. Control the software and hardware, which is really not as expensive. But that FortiGuard Labs is really the secret sauce behind it all. And the OS and FortiGuard Labs isn't just baked into FortiGate, it's baked into all of our security appliances. So I said we're not just a one-trick pony or a firewall company. We have our Forti Sandbox, which is our breach detection solution. So looking at unknown malware and reporting back whether it is malware or not. We have our FortiMail, which is our email security solution. These can be used in the cloud. They can be used on-prem, VM, appliance-based. You have a lot of flexibility in how they're deployed. Now, with all of these devices, you still have a lot of log data that you've got to make an understanding of, and that's where FortiSIM comes into play. And it's not just a typical SIM that Gartner's criteria has with its analytics and log analysis and real-time monitoring and log management. It goes to the next level. It's really a third-generation SIM. So what differentiates us is we not only have all of those, all the Gartner criteria, but on top of that, you don't have to have multiple panes of glass for understanding your SIM. It's all one single pane of glass. It also takes the stock functionalities that you would expect from a SIM and adds on the NOC functionality, such as performance, uptime, availability, software and configuration management, and the actual integration and the deployment of it is much quicker than your general SIM. It's all software-based. It's not, again, like different tools baked in or anything. It's all created from the ground up. It's easy to deploy. It only takes, typically, when you think of SIM, it takes about 3 months or more to really learn the environment and to make actual understanding of the data. Ours takes just a few weeks. It's a lot quicker. It's extremely scalable, and it works in every environment. So we understand that we cover basically a good amount of the security infrastructure. However, we also understand that our technology and our systems need to be open and easily integrate with others, whether that's in the cloud with AWS or Microsoft Azure, whether that's you're talking about software-defined networking with VMware's NXX or OpenStack, whether you're talking about some type of management with TwoFin or FireZone. Maybe you already have a SIM. Maybe you have Splunk or Alien Vault. Our SIM is still can still augment that solution there. So just as a quick case study here, not many people think of us as an AP solution and security and access layer solution, but it's a strong driver of our revenue, really. And that's in point because 2 of probably the 5 largest U.S. school districts from Nevada, Fairfax County, and this one here, Miami-Dade County, which is the 4th largest school district, are using our APs and firewalls. They have almost 400,000 students in Miami-Dade and over 400 schools. And they deployed 15,000 access points. And the reason that they chose us was really the flexibility, the easy the easy management behind it, going back to it's not making it complex in how to manage these APs, and the ability for these APs to scale really and to add on, and the actual area that they were able to cover within the schools, and the ability to implement those with security policies. So I work for Fornet, but we're huge on third-party validation. Whether that's Gartner, we're in 6 different Magic Quadrants. whether that's with our AV, we're ranked in the VB100, ICSA with our web application firewall, and NSS Labs is one that is really big for us. And the reason behind that is because NSS Labs are a bunch of engineers just like what we were founded on. They're not sending out surveys and asking you how you like this and how you like that. They're looking at the 3 key indicators of any security purchase. They're taking the appliances and the solutions and they're running them into the ground, and they're looking at security efficacy, price, and performance. And those are always the 3 key drivers for any real purchasing decision in security. And you see where we rank along with others in the same space. So I appreciate everyone's time today. Thank you very much. And if anyone has any questions, appreciate your time.
Thanks, Fred. Great.